He sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The engine was off, but his mind raced like a storm tearing through a quiet town. The phone call he'd just received echoed in his head. He was let go. No warning, no explanation, just a restructuring. Just a polite, cold end to 5 years of effort, late nights, and loyalty. And what now? Panic clawed its way through his chest. Rent was due in 2 weeks. His plans, his routines, his identity, they had all revolved around that job. Everything he thought was stable had cracked in a single moment. This is the moment where most people feel they're being tested, where life feels like a cruel and chaotic force. And yet, it's in moments like this that Stoicism doesn't just whisper advice, it shouts with clarity. Because at the heart of Stoic philosophy lies a concept that's so radical, it almost feels unnatural. Acceptance. Not the passive kind, not giving up, but the powerful kind, the kind that sees clearly what cannot be changed, and instead of resisting it, makes peace with it. Epictetus, who was born a slave and later became one of the most respected Stoic teachers, said something profoundly simple. It's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them. He wasn't being poetic, he was being practical. The man in the car hadn't lost his life, his health, or even his future. He had lost a job. But what amplified his suffering wasn't just the loss. It was the belief that this shouldn't have happened, that it was wrong, that it was unfair, that it was unacceptable. And that's where so many of us get stuck. We fight the current, demanding the world make sense on our terms. We believe that if we resist hard enough, scream loud enough, worry deep enough, we can change what's already done. But reality doesn't work like that. Seneca wrote, "A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not." He wasn't encouraging passivity. He was pointing to the doorway of freedom, real freedom, the kind that lives in the mind, not in the world outside. Think about the times in your life when something went wrong, the breakups, the betrayals, the failures. At first it felt like the ground disappeared beneath your feet, but time passed, and somehow you stood again. Not because the pain went away, but because you stopped resisting it. Acceptance isn't a weakness, it's clarity. It's a decision to stop wasting energy on what is already true, and instead redirect it toward what comes next. The Stoics weren't emotionless. They felt loss, grief, fear, but they trained themselves to respond rather than react, to pause, to say, "This has happened. Now, what will I do with it?" Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and one of the greatest Stoic minds, once wrote in his private journal, never meant for publication, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." These weren't just words scribbled in a moment of peace. Marcus wrote those thoughts in the midst of wars, betrayals, and plagues. He lived under pressure most of us can't even imagine. And still, his practice was to accept what came, not with defeat, but with dignity. There's an old metaphor that compares life to sailing. You can't control the wind, you can't control the storms, but you can adjust your sails. Acceptance is that adjustment. It's not surrender, it's navigation. And the truth is, we all know this on some level. When we stop trying to force things, when we stop clinging to how we think life should be, something shifts. The noise in our minds quiets. We breathe again. We see more clearly. In that moment, sitting in the car, the silence growing louder, the man finally took a breath. Not a shallow, panicked one, but a breath of surrender. Not because he had a plan, not because he suddenly felt brave, but because holding on to the fight was exhausting. He whispered, "Okay, this is what it is." And something loosened inside him. That was the beginning, not of collapse, but of control. Because acceptance, real acceptance, isn't the end of the story. It's the point where we stop wasting our energy on the impossible and start investing it in the possible. It's the point where we reclaim the only thing we've ever truly owned, our response. If you're finding value in this so far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more powerful Stoic lessons like these. It really helps keep this message going. The email came late at night. Just a few lines of text, but enough to trigger a spiral. Her heart raced. Her mind spun in circles. Something had gone wrong at work. Again. She reread the message, looking for something she missed, something she could fix. But there was no clarity, no action she could take tonight, just uncertainty, just the creeping sense that things were slipping out of her control. She didn't sleep much that night. Thoughts cycled endlessly. What did it mean? Would she be blamed? What if this ruined everything she'd worked for? We've all had nights like this, moments when our minds latch onto something we can't fix, yet we treat it as if thinking harder or worrying longer might change the outcome. It's instinctive. We want certainty. We crave control. But the truth is, control is not a guarantee. It's a discipline. This is one of the most powerful lessons from Stoicism, to separate what's within your power from what isn't, and to act only on the first. Epictetus said it plainly, some things are up to us and some things are not. He believed that human suffering often comes not from external events, but from our mistaken belief that we can or should be able to control them. It's like gripping a rope that's being pulled from the other end. You can keep holding on, tightening your grip until your hands bleed, or you can let go and step back. But letting go isn't easy, especially in a world that constantly tells us we should be able to fix everything. Productivity culture says we're only as good as our results. Social media says we should manage every perception, and modern anxiety often comes disguised as responsibility. But there's a quiet strength in saying, this is not mine to carry. A man loses a client. A woman gets ghosted after 3 months of dating. A student gets rejected from their dream school. Each of these events feels personal, like a verdict on their worth, their effort, their future. But none of them are fully within their control. Not the choices of a client, not the emotions of another person, not the decisions of an admissions office. What is within control? The preparation, the intention, the response. Marcus Aurelius, while ruling an empire under siege, wrote this to himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He knew that the storms around him weren't his responsibility, but how he stood in the storm that was. We often live as if we can control outcomes, but outcomes are the product of many things. Our actions, yes, but also timing, other people's choices, random events. You can do everything right and still not get the result you wanted. That's life, and it's brutal until you understand it. There's an ancient Stoic practice known as the dichotomy of control. It sounds simple, but when applied seriously, it becomes a daily filter. Is this within my control? If yes, take action. If no, release it. This doesn't mean apathy. It means clarity. It means we show up fully for what's ours, and we stop bleeding energy into what isn't. That woman who couldn't sleep over the email? She finally closed her laptop, not because the problem was solved, but because she remembered what was hers to own. Her response, her clarity, her rest. She made tea. She wrote in her journal. She set a plan for what she could address the next day, and then she let go of the rest. It was one of the first peaceful nights she'd had in weeks. The irony is, when we focus only on what we control, we become more powerful, not less. We stop wasting time trying to rewrite other people's thoughts or predict the future. We begin investing in the only space where real change is possible, our own mind, our own actions. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And if you look at your worst days, you might see how much of your pain came not from what happened, but from your resistance to what was happening. Control is not about domination. It's not about mastering everything. It's about precision, knowing the limits of your influence and using that influence wisely. There's freedom in this. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, but the kind that settles in your chest like calm, the kind that says, I did my part. That's enough. Not everyone will understand this way of thinking. Some will say it's too passive, that we should fight for what we want, push until we win. But Stoicism doesn't reject effort. It simply asks us to be strategic about where we place it. We're not the directors of life. We're actors on a stage, handed a role, a moment, a circumstance. The brilliance of the Stoic mindset is that it teaches us to play our part fully, even when we didn't write the script. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, ask yourself one quiet, powerful question. Is this mine to control? And if the answer is no, then walk away, not with defeat, but with peace. He stood in front of the closed storefront, staring at the dark windows like they might change if he looked long enough. His cafe was gone. The dream he had built cup by cup, conversation by conversation, over 5 years, gone in 5 months. The lockdowns had crushed his traffic, bills piled up. The last few weeks had been a fight against time, debt, and despair. And now it was done. His hands were empty, but his mind was full of noise, regret, blame, helplessness, and behind all of it, that one silent question: what now? We're taught to see obstacles as detours, unwanted interruptions in the path we were supposed to follow. We fight them, resent them, try to avoid them. But the Stoics believed something different. They believed that obstacles were not the enemy of progress. They were progress. Marcus Aurelius said it in a line that has echoed through centuries. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. It's not a metaphor. It's a method. When something blocks us, it also offers something, an invitation to grow, to adapt, to redirect. The world may not give us what we want, but it will always give us a next move. That man with the shuttered cafe? After weeks of silence, of grieving what he had lost, he began writing again. Just reflections at first, then articles, then a newsletter about resilience and small business stories. It took months, but in time, he built something new, not instead of his cafe, but because of its failure. Stoicism doesn't offer comfort, it offers clarity. It doesn't say, "This will be easy." It says, "You are capable." When Seneca was exiled, stripped of his position and sent away from Rome, he didn't crumble. He wrote, he studied, he built the very foundation of what would become some of the most enduring works of philosophy. Exile wasn't his end, it was the spark. And this is the shift. When you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What can I make from this?" the story changes. Every hardship contains raw material. Loss can build compassion, rejection can shape clarity, failure can sharpen purpose, but none of that happens automatically. It happens when we choose to turn toward the challenge instead of away from it. This isn't romanticizing pain. Pain is real. It knocks the wind out of you, but growth is real too, and sometimes they arrive in the same package. Epictetus, who was born into slavery, understood this deeply. He said, "Difficulties are things that show a person what they are." In other words, when life presses on you, it doesn't just test your strength, it reveals it. That's why the Stoics practiced what they called voluntary discomfort. Sleeping on the floor, wearing rough clothes, fasting, not to punish themselves but to train, to remind their minds and bodies, we are not fragile. We can endure more than we think. And more than that, we can transform what breaks others into what builds us. The world will not spare you from obstacles. It's not designed that way. But it will offer you the chance to choose what kind of person you become in response. Think back to a moment in your life where everything seemed to go wrong. Now think about what came next. Chances are that breakdown led to a new insight, a new strength, or a new direction. You didn't see it at the time. You couldn't. But it was there. The obstacle wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something you hadn't yet imagined. The man who lost his cafe eventually published a book. Not because that was his plan, but because life gave him new raw material and he chose to use it. Marcus Aurelius wrote during plagues. Epictetus taught despite poverty. Seneca counseled emperors while living under the threat of death. They didn't wait for ideal conditions. They acted in spite of them. Because the obstacle didn't mean stop. It meant build differently. Life will challenge your plans, but it cannot cancel your ability to respond with strength. It cannot take away your capacity to adapt, to rethink, to rise. So the next time something blocks your path, remember this. The obstacle is not outside the journey. It is the journey, and it might just be the most important part of it. The train was late again. She stood on the freezing platform, shoulders tight, phone in hand, checking the time every 30 seconds. She had a presentation in less than an hour. The delay meant she'd arrive rushed, stressed, and probably unprepared. Around her, other commuters groaned, cursed, paced. Some shouted into their phones. She felt the same frustration rising. But then, something stopped her. Not the train, a memory. Just last week she had read a line in her journal, a reminder she had written to herself. You don't control the train, you control how you wait. And suddenly, in that moment, She breathed differently. She put her phone away. She stood still, and she began to rehearse her opening lines in her head, not as a way to escape the stress, but as a way to own it, to respond instead of react. This is what it looks like to train your inner fortress, not once, but every day. The Stoics didn't believe in waiting for life to be calm. They believed in becoming calm within life. And that kind of strength doesn't happen by accident. It's built deliberately, habit by habit, thought by thought. Marcus Aurelius called the soul an inner citadel, a place no enemy could breach unless you opened the gates yourself. But a citadel is only strong if it's maintained, reinforced, protected. That's why the Stoics practiced mental discipline daily. They didn't wait for the storm to start building shelter. They built it in advance, brick by brick. Take Epictetus. He told his students to begin each day by rehearsing the challenges they might face. Someone will insult you, something will go wrong, plans will fall apart. Not to become cynical, but to be prepared, to remind yourself that you don't need life to go your way in order to stay rooted. This practice is called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity, a kind of emotional strength training, not to attract negativity, but to reduce its power when it arrives. It's not about paranoia, it's about composure, and it doesn't require hours of silence or a mountain retreat. It's forged in the ordinary, when someone cuts you off in traffic, when your partner says something sharp, when your plan gets derailed. Each moment is a rep, a set, a quiet opportunity to grow stronger. Just like muscles need resistance to grow, the mind needs challenge to become stable. Seneca put it simply, we should be asking ourselves, is there any habit worse than being unprepared for adversity? Because when the hard moments come, and they will, it's not your emotions that protect you, it's your preparation. Daily training doesn't mean becoming cold or robotic. It means becoming centered. It means carrying a calm so deep that chaos doesn't reach it, like a mountain unmoved by wind. Some of that training happens in the morning, through journaling, reflection, reading. Some happens in the moment, through breathing, pausing, stepping back. And some happens in silence, choosing not to respond, choosing not to escalate, choosing peace over pride. The woman on the platform knew this. She had practiced it. Each morning she wrote 3 things she couldn't control and reminded herself not to waste energy on them. She reviewed the values she wanted to live by: clarity, steadiness, compassion. Not because she always succeeded, but because each day was another chance to train. And in the moment where everything could have unraveled, she didn't need to think. She acted from habit. She had already rehearsed this discomfort in her mind. And now, she was ready. The Stoics didn't aim to be unaffected. They aimed to be unshaken. And that requires work. It requires returning to yourself each day, asking, how do I respond when things don't go my way? What habits am I reinforcing? What am I building inside? Because whether we realize it or not, we're always training something. Every time you snap, complain, spiral, you're reinforcing a reflex. And every time you pause, breathe, reflect, you're reinforcing a different one. No one sees this work. There are no trophies. But over time, the results are obvious. You become the person people turn to when everything's falling apart. You become the still point in a moving world. And most importantly, you become someone you can rely on. Because at the end of the day, your strength isn't in what you own, how others see you, or how easy life is. It's in the fortress you've built within. And that fortress is yours to train, daily. He sat in the conference room, lights buzzing overhead, eyes fixed on the presentation in front of him. Slide after slide, the same numbers, the same language, growth, scale, performance. He nodded when expected, smiled on cue, but something in his chest felt hollow. He had everything he once thought he wanted: respect, stability, even success, but none of it felt his. After the meeting, he walked past the mirror in the hallway and barely recognized the man looking back. Not because he looked different, but because he no longer knew why he was doing any of it. So many of us end up here, following expectations, chasing goals, hitting milestones, without stopping to ask if any of it aligns with what we truly value. We move fast, we perform well, but deep down we wonder, who decided this was the life we're supposed to live? The Stoics warned against this trap. They saw clearly how easy it is to confuse pressure with purpose, to spend your life climbing ladders that lead nowhere. Seneca wrote, "If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." In other words, you can work hard, you can be impressive, but if you don't know where you're going or why, it's all just motion. Purpose is different. Purpose is quiet. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't rush. It grounds you. It gives weight to your choices. And most importantly, it protects you from the noise of the world. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, constantly reminded himself to strip life down to what matters. He wrote, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" Not because he wanted to do less, but because he wanted to live with precision, with meaning, with intention. Living with purpose means asking the harder questions, not, "What do others expect from me?" but "What do I expect from myself?" Not, "What will they think?" but "Will this bring me closer to who I want to be?" The pressure to conform is powerful. It comes wrapped in praise. It looks like success. But when the applause fades, when the lights go out, you're left with yourself. And that's when the real question appears. Did I live today according to my values or someone else's expectations? There's a strength that comes from alignment, from living a life that makes sense from the inside out. That doesn't mean perfection. It means coherence. That your actions reflect your principles. That your time reflects your truth. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Not the other way around. Not do everything and hope you become someone, but decide who you want to be. Then let your life unfold from that. The man in the hallway eventually did something radical. Not dramatic, but radical. He started saying no. No to meetings that drained him. No to projects that pulled him away from what mattered. And slowly, he reconnected with the version of himself he thought he had lost. He didn't quit his job. He didn't abandon his life. He just shifted the weight from pressure to purpose, from proving to practicing, from reacting to choosing. This shift doesn't require a full transformation. It starts small, a choice, a pause, a journal entry, a moment of clarity in a noisy day. The Stoics believed that a good life is built moment by moment, choice by choice, that we always have the ability to return to what matters, and that no one, not your boss, not your family, not society, can define your purpose for you. Pressure will always exist. Deadlines, expectations, the weight of being seen. But purpose? Purpose is yours to shape, yours to protect, yours to live. And when you live from it, life doesn't just feel different. It is different, less frantic, more focused, less about proving, more about becoming. So as the day ends and the world pulls you in 100 directions, ask yourself one thing. Is this mine to carry? Or was I simply told I should? Because the difference between pressure and purpose is often just one clear choice. So as the day ends and the world pulls you in 100 directions, ask yourself one thing. Is this mine to carry? Or was I simply told I should? Because the difference between pressure and purpose is often just one clear choice. If this message resonated with you, take a second to subscribe for more insights like this. Leave a like if it gave you something to think about, and if you're grateful for what these ancient principles continue to bring us, drop a comment and just write, "Thank you, Stoics." It's a simple way to honor wisdom that still speaks to us thousands of years later.